So over the next decade, could we be seeing the end of single let buy to let properties as we know it? So BRR, the BRRR strategy, what is this? This is the buy, refurbish, rent, refinance strategy. And this strategy single-handedly is behind the growth of any real large portfolio. Majority, I'd say probably 99 out of 100, well, I'm not sure the odds quite that big, but 9 out of 10 large portfolio has been built off this strategy. So and especially single let vanilla buy to let properties. So I'm Harvey, I'm a remote property investor, and the reason I'm a remote property investor is because I still like vanilla buy to lets. And what do I mean by vanilla buy to lets also? So vanilla buy to let is just a family home buy to let. So the BRR strategy, the build triple R strategy, the buy, refurbish, rent, refinance strategy can be done on all the strategies. So you could do this on HMOs, service accommodation, you could do it on commercial conversions. So it's forcing the appreciation up. So finding an asset, finding a property and an asset, then doing works to it to force the price up, the appreciation value up, then refinancing based on the new value and pulling out a large recycling all, not always all, most often not all, or a large part of it. Definitely would aim to recycle your deposit, maybe leave the refurb in. And this strategy is what has enabled me to grow, and this is what's enabled majority of large portfolio owners to be able to grow their property, especially professional portfolio owners. You get some people that just buy property out of the earnings they're earning from other businesses, but the majority of people that do this professionally and grow it professionally grow their portfolio off the back of the BRRR strategy. So when I'm saying, is this dead? Are we seeing the end of this? The reason I'm saying this is because vanilla buy-to-lets do not work in the southeastern London anymore. The yields are too low, the purchase prices are too high. It's a bit difficult to refinance your money out of these deals. A lot of the time, the stress test rent calculation can really hold you back on how much you can re-leverage against that. So vanilla buy-to-lets really don't work. They get the odd little spots in and around the south that they do, but as a whole, they don't work anymore because the purchase prices have risen so much. So the places this is still working and working really well is in the north at the moment, but like Liverpool works really well still, Manchester works well still, but Manchester is creeping up. The Midlands is now slowly creeping out from it working. So I'm looking at this, the trajectory it's going in at the moment, especially in the north. So all the policy from the government, all of the gearing towards what the government's done at the moment. If you look at the history of property as well, it really geared up to go toward the price per earnings ratio and the fact that the wealth distribution is really evening back up again across the UK. So with the powerhouse of the North deal, with the infrastructure that's going into the North, this is why Manchester started growing again. This is why Liverpool started growing again. With all this infrastructure going in, this has really seen jobs turning up in different areas. I think COVID is really going to support this as well. So the fact that more companies are willing to let people work remotely and work not necessarily have to be a central London hub location is also going to have a massive impact on it's having a massive impact on the way the employment are looking for their locations to find employers. Just a simple example of my location. So in Stockton-on-Tees, we're getting some massive employers turning up there. So Darlington, in and around that area, Teesside and around that area. So we've got the energy renewable, it's a carbon renewable energy centre getting built in Redcar. There is Amazon's turned up in Darlington. Another Amazon's going to turn up in Billingham, right in my area. Hartlepool has got one of them 3 ports getting built. The government have moved their offices to Darlington, have moved one of their offices to Darlington. So you can really, both Labour and Conservative, the last two policies really push towards pushing more employment, more infrastructure towards the north. I follow a guy called Ray Dalio about the economic cycle, and then you look at the economic cycle, there's long-term debt cycles and short-term ones. And he says what happens is we are emotional beings, and because our emotions are run from recent history. So because the South has done so well in recent history, this is where everybody's emotional ties with capital growth. But if you look even at the numbers, the top capital growth locations in the UK have all been in the north for the last 5 years. Even last year, when the market's been super hot and we've had this buoyant sort of situation, even the northeast, it hasn't grown for the last decade, grew more than London grew. So it's just because of the affordability. Like, and the banks are not lending the same as they did before. The overseas buyers, the encouragement to invest into London as well has been discouraged. There's still always going to be investors in London. And by the way, I'm not saying London is going to fall off of a cliff. It's just that the average earnings to the average house price is 18 times different. So people can't afford to live in London. Before COVID, 4 out of 10 people that had their house on the market was looking to move out of London just for affordability and space purposes. As COVID come, well, I looked at this stat around Christmas time, that was 5 out of 10 people was now looking to exit London. This was before COVID. I don't think London will fall off a cliff, but the potential growth there is going to be a lot more difficult and comparable to what it has been in the past, because the banks are not lending so strongly. The overseas investment's not coming in as much because there's extra things like stamp duty, the 3% surcharge. They've done a cap on the capital gains tax allowance they give to overseas investors. They've done a cap on, like, some overseas investors was just buying blocks of flats and leaving them empty. So the government stepped in to realign that. But also the capital growth slowed down. So that's not as attractive. The yields have really decreased and the barriers to entry are really higher. Then the government done the powerhouse on the North deal, which was in, I think it was in around 2015 sort of time. And they've encouraged overseas investors to invest in Manchester, in North. So as I said, when you look at Ray Dalio and he talks about the long-term debt cycles, we are looking at recent history. So from 1996 up to from 1996 up to 2016, London grew 518%. That is absolutely phenomenal. That's off the charts growth. That's massive. London's plateaued since 2016. So since all these policies come in, so Section 24, more taxes, stamp duty surcharge, 3% more taxes. That's gone up to 5% now for overseas buyers as well. Loads of the powers of the North deal got announced and kicked off as well. So there's lots of different changes. Plus they capped the lending, that they'd only lend 5 times your salary, or 4.5 times to 5 times your salary. So you just look at it on a simplistic point of view. If you're in London and the average price of earning is about £37,000. So the average property in 1996 in London was like around 70k, and the average earning was around 22k. Then you fast forward to 2016, the average property was just short of £500,000, and then the average earnings only jumped up to £37,000, or 36. It's now up to £37,000. So the earnings didn't keep up with the price growth. Also, a lot of the property, if you look, there's charts out there and it shows you the average age of the owners of these properties. So if you look at the average age of the ownership of the people of these properties, there is they're all sort of baby boomers and above the age of 60. So a lot of them, the way they moved homes and the way they carried on buying and trading houses wasn't off the back of their earnings, because there's only about 5% of people in London that earn a bigger six-figure salary. The rest of them are just normal salaries, and as I said, on average £37,000. So homeowners who bought their property in the properties in London, and again, this is what I feel a lot of people miss, is you look at property prices in London in the 1980s were around 15k, but the wages was around 6k, so it was under 3 times multiplier of their income. And even in 1996 it was 22k and 70k, so it was under a 4 times multiplier. This multiplier is wider than it's ever been, and as I said, a lot of money coming from overseas buyers. There is a small percentage of super uber rich people that just buy these properties, but the rest of them, the majority of the home ownership is from older people, and their transactions are happening from equity gains, what they've got in their property, not based off their earnings or their savings. It's based off of their property prices inflated so much that they can now sell and buy other houses off the back of that. And lots of people at that age are unencumbered as well, because they got a 25-year mortgage in the late 1970s, early 1980s, and that property's paid off, and they've bought a property for maybe 15, 20k, and it's worth £1 million, £500,000 now. So this is what's fueled a lot of it. But as they're slowly passing away, unfortunately, and passing it down to their 2.4 kids, that's getting liquidated, and it's getting more and more liquidated as it goes down into the generations. And the millennials are just generally not as worried about the home ownerships as the baby boomers was. So really, really interesting times. But then you look at these other areas, I said, if you rewind out a little bit and you look at the history of of the economy in the UK, but in around the world. So Ray Dalio has looked over 500 years worth of history of how the money and markets have worked. And if you look backwards, UK had wealth distribution very evenly across the UK when we was the industrial revolutionary leaders of the Commonwealth and the world. So when we invented the steam engine, the combustion engine, the railways, the coal, the steel was getting produced. So you look, if you rewind back into the Victorian times when we were still the leaders, this is why if you go to Liverpool, Liverpool's turning around a bit faster, but you go to some of these areas that's still not caught up. So in the northeast, there's some areas that's still not fully caught. They're starting to now over this last year, but they've not really caught up. But there's great infrastructure, there's great architecture there, sorry, not infrastructure, great architecture there. And that come from when they had industry, they had steel there, they had coal there, and you think about it, it was steam engine. The steam engine was fueled by coal. Houses was warmed up by coal fires, you know, so it was one of the main fuels. And then America overtook us from after World War II. America overtook us as the world leading superpower. Oil overtook us the main fuel of the world. So for cars started really getting produced more, and then it's got used for heating us and providing even our energy and everything. And all the steel with Andrew Carnegie took away from the UK and the north, and all these areas got desolated. So then it became London's only real survival after that was a business hub, and that was London. But then bearing in mind, after World War II, 1950s, 1960s, business was very much, you walked in, you done business in the office, and you might have done a little bit over the phone, but you had to have meetings. So it was very important to have that central business hub in London. Today now, if you've got an insurance firm, for example, and you sell insurance, it doesn't matter if you've got a London office or you've got an office in Manchester, you still sell pretty much majority. I can't imagine anybody actually walking in offices to buy insurances anymore. So if you sell insurances, no matter if your office is in London or if it's in Manchester, you're still going to sell it for the same price. Your online presence is still going to cost you the same amount of money. Your advertising spend is going to cost the same amount of money, but the big savings is going to be an office in Central London is going to cost you maybe 25, 50 million. An office in Central Manchester is going to cost you maybe 1, 2 million. So straight away, that's going to be a massive saving. I think a lot of companies coming out of COVID and the uncertainty is really going to really sort of look more about reducing their overheads, having less office time. Like most firms, my wife's Expedia have already announced 2 days in the office, 3 days working from home. They've already announced that. Barclays already announced that. There's loads and loads of big players that's already announced. There's a few that haven't. Who was one of them? I think it was Amazon. Was it Amazon? Amazon is a really big player you thought would be really innovative, that would have really jumped on this, but they haven't. They've got we want to get everybody back in the office. But please, if you're enjoying this content, don't forget to hit the thumbs up, and that subscribe button really helps push this out to many more people to enjoy this also, and so you can be notified when more videos like this are being released. But yeah, but that said, majority of companies are going in that direction, which I feel will put more pressure on that. But then you look at Manchester's growth. So Manchester for the last 5 years, Liverpool, Manchester been duking it out for the top growth. Wales was really strong growth last year, but as I said, it's where the infrastructure is coming in. And if you look at their growth, it's in line with the earnings. This is why I'm quite excited about a lot of these areas, because you look at what the area earning is, you look at the demographic in the area, the earnings, what it is. The property prices are not growing because a lot of the growth pre-07 come from banks lending irresponsibly, you know, and because it was infrastructure. So when we had the crash, it dipped to roughly about 15%, and then off the back of that dip, what happened was areas that didn't have any jobs there and they would lend really irresponsibly, they didn't recover. So that was the northeast. There's not as much employers or main employers there. Areas like London that had a lot more employment there recovered a little bit quicker, and the further you got out from London, the slower the recovery was, and London bounced back really fast and comparable to others, and then really grew again. And then, as I said, there's lots of restrictions that's come in around there, 5%, 5 times multiplier on the mortgage, loads of things, the stress testing. So I'm quite excited about this one, and I feel there's always corrections in any market, in property, in economic market, but I feel this next correction is not as vulnerable as it was on the first one, especially in the property, especially in the north, because banks are lending so responsibly now. They want to know the size, if you cut your toenails with your left hand or your right hand. They want to know if you have milk with your tea. Like, it's a bit of a joke, but they want to know everything about you now. They super stress test your affordability, your knowledge. They're really stress testing you. Even as an investor, they're really stress testing investors at the moment and lending a lot more responsibly. The 5% deposits are backed by government, but they're still checking you. Even just in 2009, right in the middle of this recession, before we recovered, just as the recovery was starting to take place, I bought my first property, and even then they didn't check my bank statements and to check my employment to see. I just wrote it down and said, this is my employment, this is my bank statements, and they just give me a mortgage. So today, that's long gone. They check where the money's come from. They really dig deep into it. So the responsible lending is based on people's earnings. So these areas that are growing at the moment are not growing artificially because of asset bubbles. Because also, surveyors are holding that back a little bit. So when people are overbidding on properties, banks are coming in saying it's not worth that much and holding back on it. Where pre-07, whatever you bid on a property, the surveyor come out and say, yeah, no problem, the banks will lend on it. So there's massive different things acting at play at the moment. So yeah, really interesting time. But when I say, is this possibly the last chance of the BRR with vanilla buy-to-lets, what I mean by that is, these areas are, if they keep on continuing to grow how they grow, I'll teach people how to remote property invest, and I've actually got people now in Birmingham looking to remote property invest because the Birmingham prices have gone up so much. They're looking outside of where they live, you know. So as areas keep on going up and up, and at the moment with the amount of money printing and the asset price inflation we're getting, that looks set to keep on going. I don't think it's going to run away out of control because, as I said, the banks are holding that back. The surveyors are not allowing people to overvalue, and it's also in line with your 4.5 to 5 times multiplier of your earnings. So I don't think that's going to massively run away, but it's creeping up steadily. So over the next decade, could we be seeing the end of single-let buy-to-let properties as we know it? BRR will still work, but you'd have to then be bigger and doing like commercial conversions or HMOs and maybe getting the commercial valuations, which is much more experienced stuff, much more riskier, and it's in need of you having more experience, more knowledge, more network, and more availability to funds. And the way you get the more knowledge, more network, more availability to funds is by building up a good solid foundation. I feel them set foundations, even the banks filled out. Remember, I got interviewed by Lloyds when I went into like commercial lending. You get a relationship manager. I went with Lloyds because Lloyd had a good branch and an appetite for the lending I wanted to do at the time, and they sit you down and interview you before they take you on, the relationship manager. And because of the history I had, I stepped into that easier than I would have done if I just turned up and said, look, I want to do some commercial conversions, I want the commercial finance, and it was my first commercial loan on a property as opposed to a mortgage. And if I'd have turned up with that experience on my single lets, managing them for a while, buying the multiple properties that I had, then that would have been, yeah, not the same case. They probably wouldn't have took me on and given that commercial loan. So build up your foundation and your knowledge and cut your teeth on the smaller stuff like doing single let properties like 10, 15k refurbs as opposed to 100k refurbs, getting used to dealing with builders, getting used to quoting it, getting used to when things get challenging, because no matter how experienced you are, Mark Omer on his last development went through 3 builders, or was it 2 builders, and one of them went bust halfway through, and he's well experienced and very credible. The thing is, this happens to everybody. It's not a case of it not happening, it's just how well equipped with knowledge and network and availabilities to funds you are to be able to navigate these problems, not a case of you totally ignoring these problems. So well, not problems, challenges. Challenges come for everybody, no matter how experienced you are. But as I said, the more experienced you are, the better network you got, the quicker you navigate them. And the best way to build that experience, network and knowledge is on the single lets. But this could be the last chance. I think this next decade, I don't know for certain, I've not got a crystal ball, wish I did have, but next decade could be spending the end of that. I think if it keeps on going how it's going, BRR is going to be so competition-y. The knowledge of people and the competition is increasing, the yields are decreasing, the prices are going up, and the chance of recycling your money is going down. So then the real way to do this not now but going forward, is going to be really forcing it up through development. But that's a lot more riskier. So love to hear your views in the comments. Stick in the comments. Got quite a few views here. I'm on the 2 lives here, so I'm going to have a look across the 2. Andrew said rent has to follow to make it viable. Yeah, rent's not followed. Like, rent stayed in line with inflation. House prices has been way above inflation prices, so rent's not followed. Rent is going up, but I can't see, again, it's really linked to the earnings. But again, this is why I can't see the South, I don't think it's going to fall off a cliff, and it will have moderate growth, but not what we see previously in them crazy days from 1996 to 2016. But you rewind beyond then, the South grew the same sort of pace as the rest of the country. It was just that one crazy time, and a big part of that crazy time that started that was the money lending. Like when they started doing them subprime mortgages, and it was all to do with the stock market, and they was batching together these subprime mortgages and selling it and floating it, so that they was earning money like floating and playing the markets, not from the products. And they were just pushing the products out the door, and they had the motivation to push it out the door. The brokers were getting commission, the VAT surveyors were getting their commission, and it just fueled this on. The banks were just throwing money at the door irresponsibly, and that was the start of that rocket up of prices. The banks are not going to do that again, not within the like sort of near future. So I can't see that happening again unless we see banks start lending above 5 times earnings. Like I asked this to every educated property investor that says, no, London will be fine, it always has been fine. I'm saying to them, how? Like, can you explain to me, rather than just saying it's always has been, tell me how. Like, if like earnings are this, if the prices are this, and if it's wider than it's ever been, and debt's wider than it's ever been, how can it keep on going forward? Interest rates are lower than it's ever been. How can it? I can't see how. Like, if somebody give me a educated opinion on it, rather than just saying because it always has, I would love to hear it, but I really can't see how. And this is why it's not performed better for the last 5 years. And it's like them things when people hold on to an old thing and they keep on saying, no, it'll come back, and it's like, how long do you want to give it? It's been 5 years now that it's not been the top performer. So how many more years is it going to be before like the penny kind of drops, you know? And even last year when the market was all on fire and the property market has been booming, still hasn't. So how much longer do you really want to see this? And it is because of the price per earnings, affordability is just not there. Overseas buyers are not coming in, as I said, as much. They're still there, people are still buying, but that's why it's slowed it down. And I think that slow down is there to stay in the South. I might be wrong, but I feel my opinion, my thoughts around that are definitely educated. So yeah, I'd love to hear other people's educated thoughts around that. Thanks everybody for joining us. Love to hear your comments love to hear your views in the comment. Remember everybody, if you don't evolve your ideas, you're never going to live on your own terms. So evolve your ideas, live on your own terms. Have a fantastic evening.